October 16th
16th.
meeting of the Board of Selectmen to order. First item on our agenda is public comment. Is there any public comment? There being none, the minutes from October 2nd. It's the pleasure of the board.
Mr. Chair, I move that we accept the minutes of October 2nd, 2019 as presented.
Second.
Any discussion? There being none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. We have a utility pole installation public hearing for Walnut Street. We've received an application from National Grid and Verizon New England for the installation of a new utility pole on Walnut Street, beginning at a point approximately 325 feet south of the center line of the intersection of Prospect Street and continuing approximately 10 feet in an easterly direction. National Grid to install one stub pole to anchor and a guide dead end pole number 9. Information enclosed. Mike?
Mr. Chair, if I may, I don't think we have anyone here from National Grid, do we? No one here from National Grid. So this was a pole that's being impacted due to the Walnut Street project. There was a tree that had a guide wire that was attached to it, and that tree was removed. So it had to be, they have to put in a stub pole in order to secure that pole. However, I don't know, again, procedurally how we would move forward with it, but, so Mr. Duffy, who's here, Economic Development Director, had spoken with National Grid. They'd worked out the location for where that new stub pole would go based on the project. So we were moving forward with the hearing, since it was a request by the town that we needed to do this, to ask for approval. However, National Grid has indicated that once their engineer signed off on the town's amendment, they haven't yet received approval from Verizon to do that. So whether the board could vote to approve it subject to Verizon okaying it based on the redesign by Mr. Duffy, or whether you want to defer to the next meeting, it's up to the board.
Unless the board objects, I would entertain a motion to approve it or reject it, subject to approval by Verizon.
Yeah, because we did have a legal notice in the paper last week and advertising the hearing, so, you know, whether that would, I guess whether you would either open the hearing and then continue it, so we wouldn't have to re-advertise, or we would have to re-advertise, you know, again for the next hearing.
Unless there's an objection, I'm gonna open the hearing and
Yep.
see where we end up. Is there anyone here to speak in favor of the proposal? Is there anyone here to speak against it? Being none, the public hearing is closed. Is there any questions from the board for Phil or Mike?
Yeah, I just as one comment, just for the board, if the board is going to take action, that Mr. Duffy would be overseeing the project, and at least would know, you know, on the town's behalf, what's, you know, being done and being done the way we need it to be done. So, so it's not as though it's a project we wouldn't, you know, we would have to monitor if there was a neighborhood issue, that Mr. Duffy would be aware of that right away. So.
What's the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the request of National Grid pending the agreement of Verizon.
Second.
Any discussion? There being none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Unanimous. Next item on our agenda is Dr. Meyer from the Clinton Public Schools to present accountability data. I want to express mine and the board's enthusiasm for your willingness to keep the Board of Selectmen in the loop about regarding things going on in the Clinton Public School System. Thank you, Dr. Meyer.
Thank you for having me. So I just want to give an update on the accountability data. You might have saw there was an article in Telegram that the Clinton Elementary School was identified for targeted or focused support by the state. So we talk a little bit about accountability. They look at various things. They look at our MCAS scores. They look at things like graduation rate. They look at our attendance rates. They look at how every subgroup is doing, whether that's by race or economically disadvantaged, students with special needs, and they kind of come up with these ratings. So overall, there hasn't been a lot of change. We went up in some areas, we went down in some areas. There's some things that we're working on. There's a link I put there because there's it's very hard to kind of print everything out for you because it's very interactive now. There's a lot of little tabs you can click on. So if you had any interest, it's all public information on the DESE website. Clinton Elementary School was identified as requiring assistance or intervention. Basically, we had two underperforming subgroups, our white students and our high needs students. Basically meaning when you look at how those subgroups compared to other groups in the state, we were in the lowest category. One thing to note, and it's not an excuse about it, but this is the first year that grade 4 was back in Clinton Elementary School. So part of what that did is that kind of changed the methodology for how they look at the accountability for the school. When we only had the 3rd grade there, it's almost like they had kind of like an incomplete data set because they only had one grade. When you have 3rd and 4th, they both take the MCAS, because 3rd grade's the first year you take the MCAS. Now they looked at some other factors like growth. They looked at a cohort of kids, same cohort that took it in 3rd and 4th, and looked at different things like that. So it's, like I said, it doesn't change the fact that we have work to do at their scores, but it's just so you know, it's not like, there was this dramatic drop. It's almost that we moved a grade down, and it kind of, now we're playing by slightly different rules. Last year we had 2 major curriculum changes. We implemented a new math curriculum, K-6, and a new literacy curriculum, K-6. If you look, that snapshot of data I showed you there, it has 3 years worth of MCAS scores. That represents our average scaled score. The state scales the scores so that the average for the state should be 500. It's a scale from 440 to 560. You can see the green there in the math column. You could see grades 3 through 6 all showed significant gains last year with the implementation of the new curriculum. We were pleased to see that. I think part of that was because we were really focusing on our previous program that we had been using. Actually, it was kind of an older version and really hadn't been touching on all the state standards appropriately. We feel the new curriculum better addressed the state standards and made our students more prepared and ready for the test. Grades 3 through 8, you can see it's sort of a mix. We had some increases in grades 3 and 7, but some drops in 4, 5, and 6. It was a pretty significant drop in grade 4. Once again, as part of, we did move grade 4 from the middle school to the high school, or middle school to the elementary school, excuse me. And one of the things that we did when we did that is at the middle school, they were using more of a middle school model where they were teaching grade specific. So some of the subject specific. So teachers would teach like English all day, math all day, science. When we moved into elementary, we went more to an elementary model where you teach all the students all the subjects. So we need to we had some a little bit of a learning curve there that we think we need to overcome. But we did see a nice jump in the 3rd grade ELA, which I think is promising. They worked well with our literacy coach, implementing the curriculum with fidelity. We're confident that what we're doing is the correct course of action with our curriculum changes. I think right now it's just a matter of us making sure we continue to build capacity in our teachers and make sure that we're supporting them with the resources and the curriculum guidance to make sure we're addressing all the needs of all our learners. This year, we're working with what's called the statewide system of support. That's part of what happens when you are requiring assistance and intervention. Along with that, we are working with Looney Math Consulting, their consulting company that does professional development. We were able to pay for that through our Title IIA grant, the Teacher Quality Improvement Grant. And in fact, what we found out working with the statewide system of support is that the state also has a grant with Looney, that they contract out some of their support services with them. So they've actually added additional time to our consulting through the statewide system of support, that no cost to us. It's part of the assistance they provide. Our literacy coach, we still were able to fund a literacy coach position. That's funded through our Title I grant, and that position will continue to work on. Last year, a big chunk of that was just mapping out the curriculum, and this year it's really more on getting into the classrooms and more of a coaching model to help build that capacity within the classroom. We're also focusing heavily this year on what we call social emotional learning, really trying to understand that kids come to school with a lot of other things on their mind, and we need to help make sure that we're getting them ready to focus on learning and in a position to learn and be successful. So we've had some We've worked with a consulting company, Rebus Consulting, to do some train-the-trainer work. So we have SEL-trained staff, social emotional learning trained staff in each building who will help leading professional development within the building to look at kind of improving the culture, doing things like, morning meetings and making sure that we have a positive environment, building connections with kids, trying to support kids who might have trauma or other factors, things like that. So, overall, I think we were very pleased with the way the math scores went. This year, I actually should make a note that last year we only made the changes K to 6 in math. This year we're going all the way up to grade 8, so you see those drops in grade 8. Where as we extend up through that now with the curriculum revision, we're hoping that those will turn to green next year. So, we were pleased to see that the changes we made in math seem to be very positive. I think what we have in the ELA we can call, a little bit of an implementation dip, just as we kind of get everyone on the same page. So that's sort of my update on accountability. On the back page of your sheet, this is just a sample. This is literally a printout. This is kind of a summary. This is like what one of the pages looks like if you go to the website. But there's, like I said, there's a whole bunch of tabs on here, like detailed information, subgroup results, overall results. So that's why it's like, if I were going to give you guys a whole copy of the printout, it would be, this big. So I just wanted to share at least a sample, give you the link, and certainly if you go look at it and you have any other specific questions, I'd gladly come back and talk to you about anything that we're doing. We are in the process of analyzing this data even further. We drilled down to kind of really look at the curriculum level, like what standards, what strands were we weak in compared to like the state average. Our professional development day on October 25th is really focused on data analysis and making those corrective action steps on action steps for improvement. And also we'll have a meeting, our tri-council meeting on November 4th, where we'll present all that data to the school committee and our school councils so that they can use that data for building school improvement plans. So that's sort of an overview of accountability. I don't know if anyone has any questions at this point.
Anyone?
Dr. Meyer, do you think do you think we have just focused more on math over the last 1 or 2 years, and that's part of the reason why there's been kind of an uptick in?
So what it comes down to in, yes. So first I'd say yes, we've identified math a few years ago as sort of an area we needed to improve upon. We've been working hard on math, and I think that's why we kind of see those gains now.
Right.
I think with ELA, it's almost like we went from we're going from more of like a scripted program to more of a kind of teacher-centered program, more of a workshop model where you should really be focusing on meeting the individual needs of each student. So ultimately, that program, research is going to say, is going to be more successful, but it's almost like building the capacity to make sure that teachers are able to have enough direction, support, resources to fully implement that workshop model as a challenge. So I think that's why we saw a little bit of that dip. Like I said, I think it's a little implementation dip that is necessary for us to make the changes so that we can actually see gains in the long term. Otherwise, we were going to just kind of be flatlined.
Understood.
Dr. Meyer?
Yeah.
I'm curious about the business of first year of grade 4 back in CES, new methodology for calculation.
Yeah.
How will that be different next year? Because the third graders this year, everything's going to be new for them when they go to middle school.
Yeah, so I guess the way the state views their tests now, since they came out with the new MCAS a few years ago, in 2017, they view each of them because they scale the center score to be 500. So they view them all as the same, right? So when they calculate an average for like a school, they're not identifying it based on like one test. They're averaging your tests together. And so basically this year, the tricky part we had was they were kind of averaging our 3rd and 4th grade data together and comparing that to what was just 3rd grade data the year before. Even though historically, if you look at it, the 4th grade had been a little bit lower than the 3rd grade anyway. So it kind of emphasized maybe some of that change. Where next year, now they should be comparing to the same baseline. We should be comparing apples to apples. So I think moving forward, we should be good. And like I said, we did actually appeal our accountability rating. We kind of went through it with the state. And ultimately, at the end of the day, you know, the scores are the scores, and we just need to, you know, look at the data, figure out where we need to improve and make our adjustments. And I think, like I said, we're on the right path. It's just a matter of executing our plan, so.
Okay, thank you.
I did include one other update on here, just a budget update, just so you can see. There is a Student Opportunity Act, if you've heard that, that's kind of going around the Commonwealth. The governor's office did release some estimates. They did say kind of it's not really for planning purposes, but it was for just sort of illustrative purposes. And I shared this snapshot as kind of from that spreadsheet. And it shows that basically their goal is, you know, you can see our Chapter 78 in FY20 this year was $13,416,000. The goal for next year would be for us to have an increase up to $14,387,000, so basically an extra $1.5 million in Chapter 70. And ultimately, their goal is by, if this legislation passes, by FY27 to have our Chapter 78 up to $18,775,000. Now, a lot of cities and towns kind of got caught off guard when these numbers came out, because if you look at that percentage, the required local contribution as a percentage of the foundation budget, they're kind of keeping that sort of static, which means if you're getting a whole lot more Chapter 70, but that means your required local contribution is going to have to go up. So if you look here, our required local contribution last year was 10.6, went up to, next year it would be 11.2, and in FY27 they have it going to 15,275. Now, the good news is, basically, ever since the override, you know, our FY19 local contribution, which is the last kind of end-of-year report where we capture all our expenses, was $14,497,000. So we're already, you know, significantly over minimum contribution. So I don't think it's something where we're sitting there, you know, we have to worry about the fact that, you know, it's, oh, we have to come up with $4 million over the next 7 years. No, we're almost to that 15.27 mark, you know what I mean? So I think we're doing all right in terms of how we're moving forward. But we just want to keep an eye on that, because, and then that's why I made that last note, the indirect cost or the chargeback agreement. Basically, there's an agreement that we have to use for the auditors and for our end-of-year report that says essentially what cost does the town absorb directly that basically count to school spending. So for example, the town accountant or positions like that, there's a percentage in that agreement that says, okay, they deal with, you know, if the budget is this, basically, you know, 40% of their time is spent dealing with school stuff. So 40% of that salary actually counts as net school spending. With the significant changes we made in the facilities department, with the fact that we basically have a full-time school resource officer right now, and even the hopes of, you know, the human resource person, we want to make sure that we capture those in an indirect cost agreement. Because I think we just want to be fair. I think we've been working together well, the schools in the town. I think we've come up with some great things to kind of help us be more efficient. And I just want to make sure we capture that so that we're you know, the town is getting, you know, credit essentially for the supports that they're giving the schools. So when we look at our end-of-year reports, those things are reflected accurately. So I know I did send a letter to the Government Affairs Board, I think,
Yeah.
and it basically was just saying the same ideas. It just, you know, I think everything is going well. I feel like we have tremendous support from the town. I think we work well together at this point, and I hope just that would continue in the future. But I think with just a couple things that, from just a accounting perspective, we just want to button up, because I think it's going to be, you know, advantageous to the taxpayers of Clinton, but not at a disadvantage of the students of Clinton, because you're going to see such large Chapter 70 increases that we should be able to still make the progress we need to make. Okay.
Okay.
Dr. Meyer, I want to thank you not so much for coming here tonight and including the Board of Selectmen and giving us a knowledge base of what's going on in the schools, but your attitude that you keep using "we," and past administrations, we haven't had that. And maybe it was partly our fault too, but it always seemed like the end of the year report was kind of like the town's trying to charge the schools for things.
Right.
But what we're really trying to do, and you've acknowledged that, is get credit for what the town is doing, the contribution the town is making
Right.
to the educational system. So I want to thank you for that,
Oh,
because I think it goes a long way to improving things in the town of Clinton for everybody.
and I think, all I can say is I just know my job is easier because of some of the things that we've been, the facilities department has made my job easier. Being able to work with you guys has made my job easier. And I think that as we continue to just look at these, like I said, these efficiencies, the fact that we were able to work with the police department and get a school resource officer. I mean, those types of things, like those are all things that are just things that have helped us tremendously. But like I said, we need to make sure, if we don't have the document that spells out what we're doing, then when we do an end-of-year report, they're gonna say, well, you can't charge that, and then it's gonna end up being, now we, like I said, we're not getting credit for what we're doing,
Right.
so. But thank you.
Would you like the Board of Selectmen or the town administrator to make a presentation to the school committee? We'd be available.
You're always welcome.
Thank
In
you.
fact, I might see you Monday.
You will. Anyone else have anything
No.
for Dr. Meyer? Again, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Next agenda item is Community Economic Development. Mr. Duffy?
Mr. Chairman, members of the Board of Selectmen, thank you for offering me the opportunity to speak to you this evening. I've come to you on 3 matters, the first of which is a contemplated application for grant funding from the Municipal Vulnerability Program. You may recall that in the spring, we wrapped up our Community Resilience Report. That was a multi-board, multi-department effort to identify the town's particular vulnerabilities relative to climate-driven weather events. We received word in August, I believe, that we were accepted or designated as an MVP community, and now are eligible to apply for action grants from the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs MVP program. These are grants of $25,000 to $2 million to help communities implement the recommendations of their plan. So a little bit of background on our plan. What was it? The area that was identified as the highest concern in our plan was Counterpane Brook and its drainage system. You may know that roughly 4.7 square miles of Clinton, Lancaster, and Sterling effectively drain through a pipe that runs underneath downtown Clinton. That this system is, where it's underground, is built in phases that date back in parts to, I believe, the 1870s, and that this system has failed twice in the last 10 years. In 2010, when there was general flooding throughout the region, including the Nashua River, and again in 2017, when a severe rain event caused multi-million dollars of damage to one of our largest employers and another significant important business. So following that 2017 event, the town collaborated with NIPRO to make an application to FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, for a hazard mitigation grant. And we have received word very recently that application has been accepted, and we'll be beginning working jointly on an analysis of sections of that drainage system that serve the drainage area of Burdett Hill down through Nitro and into the culvert under private property, effectively from Main Street in front of Dunkin' Donuts to the edge of the ball fields. But that's only one section of this culvert. And now that we're eligible for an action grant under the MVP program, we are contemplating other efforts we may make to assess the viability of this system and address any deficiencies it has in terms of capacity or condition. So on that mind, I've had some conversations both with engineers at GCA, with NIPRO's engineers at BSC who did our work, and also with the state and with property owners to kind of devise an application that might further our consideration of this element. And so what I'm coming to you to ask for is your consideration for an application to the MVP program that would look at primarily look at the segments of that system that extend from the Coach Lakes Pond Dam to Main Street, that run underneath 3 properties on Main Street that flood habitually. I have spoken with each of those property owners. They each have acute experience with that property. One of them floods every year. They let the basement fill up, 3 feet of water, then they pump it out, and it's done. And they're all very interested in making their property available for sale. If not that, if that proves to be too unwieldy a proposal, there are other segments of drainage that we can look at. There are other segments of the culvert. There's actually a problematic section that runs underneath the Ash Street ball fields, where it actually runs uphill for a segment. Application would need to do this feasibility analysis and also to pay for any permitting of projects that might arise out of either feasibility study. The applications are due November 14th. There's a 25% match the community is required to make. That match can be in kind or cash. We are so early in the process, the RFP only hadn't been released last week. They haven't really formulated a scope of work or a project estimate. But I wanted to come to you now so that to understand if you were supportive of the effort and get your endorsement before proceeding to flesh out the scope of work, provide an estimate, and bring them to you at your next meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Duffy. Any questions from the board?
Yeah, I had some trouble understanding you, so
Sorry.
this might be sort of repetitive. We've received an MVP action grant for counterpane. You've just received word from the Massachusetts Emergency Management System that we and NIPRO got a grant to do something with this counterpane brook culvert,
Yes.
to assess it and see what it's going to cost to fix it.
Yeah, to see if there's some workarounds. Yeah, essentially that, a feasibility analysis of a segment of the system.
Okay. And so that's good news. But what you're also wanting to know is, would we be interested in pursuing a grant, correct me if I'm wrong, for the areas of the culvert between Coach Lace and
And Main Street.
NIPRO and Main Street?
Yeah, effectively a different segment of that system.
Okay, all right. So I just wanted to make sure I understood what you were here for. That's all I had, Mr. Chairman.
Does anyone else have a question?
Mr. Chair, so the issue is, I mean, whatever issues are with that culvert seem to come up when we have heavy rains. Is that a fair statement?
They've come up under severe events. One of the premises of the MVP program is an insight that these severe events are going to happen with greater frequency. That that weather models and climate models are predicting more extreme and erratic weather events.
So what's the difference between heavy rain and severe event?
What-
Snow?
Yeah, well, yeah, there's snow, wind events, drought, all those things are coming along in the community. Tidal surges, all those kinds of things. Each community has identified its particular vulnerability. We've identified flooding as our greatest concern, and flooding particularly along this corridor.
My question is there any theory or is there any idea, like what specifically about the culvert causes, why are we having floods when we do have? Is it just that it's not big enough to withstand the amount of water that's running through it? Are there holes in it, cracks in it, or is this part of what the analysis is going to determine?
That's part of what the analysis will determine. That's one working theory, is that the capacity in certain pinch points is not adequate. Obviously in 2010, the flooding was exacerbated by the fact that we had a cave-in a couple weeks before, so the structural condition of the culvert may have been the primary or sole or merely one of many contributing factors to the flooding we had in 2010. But in 2017, that was all repaired, and we still had a severe flooding event.
And so NIPRO is involved in this pursuit of this grant of
NIPRO was involved
forward.
in the first phase.
in the first, so just the counterpane brook culvert or the,
No, the work that's going to be done this year. We're applying for funds for future activity.
okay, for the coach, and from working there, I'm assuming that's because they're in a pretty vulnerable area when we have floods?
Yes.
Yeah, because I know it's hectic when we've had bad floods
Yes.
in areas of NIPRO. Okay.
And they've taken very proactive steps to insulate, to lower risk at their site. But
Right.
nevertheless, that water still has to go somewhere, and it has to go into that pipe and upstream.
Anyone else? What's the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we indicate to the Director of Community Economic Development's agreement to pursue an action grant for assessing the Counterpane Brook culvert.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? There being none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous?
Great, thanks. I expect to be back to you at your next meeting. We have one meeting before the grant application is due to give you more information.
So at the next meeting is when we'll be discussing the extension of this project, the coach lace to Main Street, or am I misunderstanding
Yeah,
that? Okay.
Yeah, or not, quite frankly, there's still a lot of legwork to be done to understand how feasible it is within a budget,
Okay.
so.
Is there any reason to continue further after, because we're doing this, then we're doing coach lace to Main Street? Is there any thoughts that like we would want to inspect the culvert like further? Like, I don't know how, or is that,
Yeah.
if we do this and we do the coach lace to Main Street, does that cover what we think are the trouble areas for the culvert?
You know, forgive the pun, Ed, but I'm out of my water on this. I really have to rely on
Okay.
I have to rely on the professionals and what their understanding of the conditions are. There are a couple pinch points that are upstream of these segments, but one thing that the grant RFP stresses is, take off a manageable bite-sized chunk of your project. Don't try to do it all at once because the funding won't be there. So,
Okay.
and you have to finish the work within a year or so. So I don't know, but
Mr. Chairman, I just have one more question. After it gets past NIPRO,
mhm.
the water from Counterpane Brook,
Yep.
it empties into the Nashua River?
Yeah,
Where's
what
it go?
happens, it goes in culvert underneath the ball field in Ash Street.
Uh-huh,
Then it daylights just north of Water Street in front of Prescott Mills.
into the Nashua River.
And then it runs into Counterpane Brook daylights. And it's in a steep ravine, but it flattens out in places like just before Plain Street. And it goes into a channel just before Allen Street. And then it goes into the wide floodplain behind Mr. Busnell before it enters the river.
Okay, all right.
Did I hear you say at one point that part of the culvert that we're talking about actually has an incline?
In two places, yeah.
That's part of the culvert that we're gonna be looking at?
Yeah,
Okay, because I mean, I'm not an expert in this field, but I do know that water doesn't usually like to travel uphill.
yeah,
It's an antiquated, the whole thing's antiquated, is the bottom line.
yeah.
Phil, isn't that a design, an intentional, it's a sump?
I'm not sure. And
My
the-
understanding is
It
it's a
happened in
sump.
two locations. One is at the, basically where the ramp is going down between the old and new fire
Right.
station. Yeah, and that could be a design thing, or they could be, the engineer thought maybe they were trying to get above some infrastructure. Because the other place it does is in the middle of the ball field, and if you drew a straight line out of Ash Street, it's pretty much across the field from the bottom of Ash Street. And I thought it might have been the sewer line, but Chris says that's like 14 feet in the ground, so it's not likely. One thing is that it's very flat. From Dunkin' Donuts to Water Street, the change in pitch is only about a foot.
I do have a question on this too.
Yeah.
If this grant's successful and the analysis is being done, does that include the discharge system that is underground from the Coach Lace Dam and there's numerous valves and numerous large diameter pipes that flow underground, one of them having been
Broken,
damaged maybe 10 years ago
yep.
and basically almost emptied the pond?
Yeah, I'm going to guess not, because that's not really part of the drainage system. That's old fire suppression or water supply for the mills that's no longer used. I'm going to guess the solution to that problem is to bite the bullet and chop off the pipe. I don't think that's just, I guess I'd have to
Well,
look.
it's part of it is the flood, the elevation control of the pond itself,
Yep.
too. If the pond were flooding and those valves and pipes were active, they could keep the pond from overflowing the
Yeah,
embankment.
maybe that's called a tow drain. Yeah, maybe they function as maybe they could function as a tow drain, yeah.
I'm just wondering
No,
if
yeah.
that would be included,
Yep.
because the historical knowledge of all that stuff and how it works is long gone.
Truly, yeah. Well, you're
But
walking.
the valves are still there up at the dam, and there's a second house down below, or second set of valves down below the bridge.
You can be hacking through the weeds back there, and there'll be a drain or a fire hydrant,
Yeah.
a valve. Okay.
Okay, we did vote on it, right?
We did.
We did, all right. Next item, Mr. Duffy?
Next item is a follow-up to a request that the board made to me, I believe, back in July. You had received some citizen comments about the appearance of 329 High Street, the old Jeans Towing. So I looked at that letter, and I thought there were some very useful recommendations in that letter, so I followed up upon them. And also, I provided you a memo that gives a brief synopsis of activity that's happened since July. The DPW went in there and cleaned up, and they'll do so one more time before the end of the year. We'll also try to get some of that signage down. I received word that the Polish banquet sign should be done this week.
Yep, can't wait.
Yeah, I heard the Polish banquet
It's gonna
sign's
be great.
supposed to be done this week. That's what I was told last Tuesday. But also the freestanding sign on along Water Street. We'll see if we can get somebody in a ladder to, the sign is actually falling off the sign structure. Get that cleaned up. One of the recommendations that had a cost ramification was the idea to paint the building a battleship gray, make it all go away until something happens there, whether it includes the building or not. And since we had a little bit of money left over from the legislative earmark we received in the spring after clearing up the site, I did receive a proposal, and that proposal is less than the funds that are remaining on that legislative earmark. So I'm forwarding it to you for your consideration. The idea would be to lightly prepare the building, not a heavy scrape down, just get rid of the obviously flaking paint, and just paint the whole building one color, presumably something like a battleship gray. That would reduce kind of the visual noise at the site, and that can sit there until your board determines on the process for disposing of that property, and just make it tidy until such time as something happens there. So you have that proposal before you. In addition, I propose installing some no parking signs and maybe some plastic chaining between the signs along the edge of the property. We shouldn't be allowing people to park there, having done some environmental remediation, so just to make it an actual physical barrier rather than just a sign in the window of the building saying no parking. Those together would come out to just about $1,900 based on where they are. If there's any minor cost overruns, I propose those be that we utilize miscellaneous income and the control of my office to address what I'm going to imagine would be on the order of a couple $100 in differences, in changes to cost. But I just want to put that forward to follow up and to put that forward for your consideration.
Does the board, what's the pleasure of the board on that subject?
Mr. Chair, I move we approve, we authorize the Director of Community and Economic Development to accept a proposal from Revive Painting for $1,750 to treat and paint the town-owned property at Jean's Auto.
Second.
Any discussion?
Well, I don't have any discussion specifically about this, but I'm just reacting to something you just said, that awaiting this board's action as to the disposition of that building. I mean, I thought at town meeting, we got permission to issue an RFP for it.
We did.
So wouldn't you be drawing up the RFP, or?
We have to decide what we want to do with it.
Yeah, and I think there's, what I suggest, Mr. Jakonski,
Let me just, would this be Mr. Devolved? Yeah, the committee, who's going to do that?
I propose we put a sign on there, looking for proposals. I'd like to see a for sale sign, but if not a for sale sign, at least a proposal to do something with the property rather than let it sit there.
oh yes, agreed.
But who specifically is supposed to get to the point where somebody issues an RFP?
Whomever you direct. And you can direct me.
Who directed anyone?
Okay.
I think,
Let-
I think, Mr. Chair, I think at the last meeting, the board talked about putting that to the surplus property committee, that
Okay.
Mr. Busno and Mr. DeValco
Okay.
are on that committee.
Okay.
Right,
All right.
and-
No, I wasn't aware of that. I think, I was going to suggest that however that RFP is devised, that RFP has to identify what we prioritize. And we have to explain to applicants, to respondents, how we're going to evaluate the proposals and be pretty specific, saying, we like this, and if you tell us something we really like, we're going to give you 5 points. If you give something we kind of like, we're going to give you 3 points, that kind of stuff.
I just wanted to make sure there was some process to get to the
Yep.
point that you referenced.
Yep.
That's the only thought I had.
And I'm happy to participate in that
Great
process.
chance we could sell it as is, that's why.
Okay.
But that's not what,
I'd like to stay focused on the motion that's before us,
Yeah.
and then go on to other parts of that conversation. We have a motion and a second to authorize the painting and signage, no parking signage and chain on the
Leave it for
property.
now.
Is there any other discussion on that subject? There being none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous. Now, if the board wants to pursue a discussion with the subcommittee and Mr. Duffy on how to make sure that we are moving forward on addressing that piece of property.
Mr. Chair? Yeah, I would strongly urge that the subcommittee meet with Mr. Duffy just to, so that they understand the charge that we were given at town meeting, that it's not just to sell as is, that we were given the authority and the, to decide the direction that goes in. We're not just slapping a sign on it and getting rid of it because it's an important property. Town meeting thinks that some thought should be put into it. I just would hope that whatever direction we go in, that some thought is put into it.
I know, oh, I'm sorry.
I would assume that our process is that the subcommittee would consider, evaluate, and present a recommendation to this board on how to proceed with that property, and that the board would then direct the town administrator or Mr. Duffy to draft an RFP and move forward along that line. But the recommendation should come from the subcommittee after they've considered all the possibilities.
Right,
Is that,
right, yeah.
And speaking for being on the Cable Commission, I know that's just been identified as a possible site for a studio location. That's something we're taking very seriously with the Cable Commission, so I think it's good that I'm on the subcommittee with Mr. Busno. I'm also on the Cable Commission committee, so that's something I would like to just take a look at. What's the feasibility of that being a good spot for a studio? And that's, I still have to talk to you and others to kind of find out what are the limitations of that property, what we can do there, what we can't do there, to see if it even makes sense.
Okay.
okay, are we all set with
All
that
set.
conversation?
Yeah.
Downtown improvement project?
Excuse me, on the order of an update, let's just give you guys an update on what has transpired since town meeting. Over the summer, the two big things that went on were we applied for a MassWorks grant. We're still waiting to hear word on that. They haven't made any announcements yet. I expect that within the next 30 days, we should have an understanding of whether we've been successful in our application or not. We've also extended the contract with our engineers. As you know, you guys voted on that a few weeks ago. So they are continuing to work on the project. As you know, it is a $4.5 million project to address deficient conditions downtown, in particular lighting, landscaping, paving, sidewalks, and certain pedestrian improvements having to do with changing curb radii, and introducing some mid-block crossings, and improved signage. That is effective, and some street furnishings as well, trash cans, benches, that kind of stuff. That is the scope of the work. The summer was an area of light activity. The subcommittee, the steering committee that has been shepherding this project to date, met this afternoon with our engineers, as well as with one of property owners whose property is proposed for one of the more profound changes to the curb line. That was a very amicable and productive meeting this afternoon. We'll be meeting with others next week, and we'll be gearing up for a stakeholder meeting for downtown business owners and property owners, slated now for the 28th, a week from Monday at 7 p.m. in this room. We are on track to produce a 100% design by the end of December, with drawings being advertised in February, bids received in early March, and maybe actually bids received in late February, and a notice to proceed being issued, I believe March 20th is the target date. So the project continues on track. It continues to be overseen by a downtown steering committee, which is composed of 9 people, and there will be a public meeting on the 28th, which we invite the stakeholders to come and view the proposal as it stands, the design as it stands, and to get their feedback.
Thank you, Mr. Duffy. Any questions from the board?
Yeah, so that, the meeting is on October 28th?
28th.
Can you just briefly, what steps are we taking just to kind of make sure people are aware of it?
We're going door to door at the end of this week. We'll be making personal outreach to everyone we can.
Okay,
Email. We have a list that is fairly comprehensive as to business owners, certainly. Some of the property owners will have to, they're invisible, they're kind of LLCs and, our real estate trusts. They're hard to reach, but we'll reach them by mail and let them know. And that also won't be the last word on project two. People can obviously call us at any time, set up a time to look at the drawings. We'll come down and talk to people
Okay.
at any time.
and that MassWorks grant, is that the grant you were discussing that we may want to potentially use to hire like a point coordinator, like a point person, for lack of a better term, for this project to communicate with the businesses?
As the project develops and we receive the budget, I propose, I'm contemplating making a proposal to the board that we hire a communications consultant to work with us on this project, that someone who can liaise directly with the property owners, be directly available to listen to their concerns and to present them to whatever entity in town is superintending the project, whether it be my office or the DPW or the town administrator. We're all very busy. I think that this kind of communication is very difficult to undertake, given other responsibilities that every department has, and I think it's especially important on a project like this. I say this anecdotally, but it took 6 years for the infrastructure downtown on the last project to kind of start to fall apart, but I think it took about 6 months for the businesses to be tired of the project. And I think the more we can do to communicate and address people's concerns, the better the project will be.
Okay, and this grant, you're thinking will you plan on using this grant to, or at least part of this grant for that position, or?
Well, the grant is part of a total project budget.
Okay.
So, the grant is $1.5 million.
Okay.
We've committed as a town $4.5 million for the project, but we'd like to
Oh, okay.
offset that.
Forgive me, I misunderstood. So this is so this is the portion that, the reason, yeah, so this is the reason that we structured the $4.5 million the way that we did, so
Yes.
that we could get, okay, all right, sorry, misunderstood.
Okay, anyone else for Mr. Duffy? Well, he gets off easy tonight.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry for, I don't think I took a breath during that MVP presentation. I apologize for that.
Next item on our agenda is goals and objectives discussion. Is there any discussion on this tonight?
No, yeah, Mr. Chair, I think at the last meeting, the board had finalized the list that you wanted to put forward for the year. So what I'll do is, for each meeting, is to develop that into on the outline, is to put all those listed on the outline, so the board can track them each meeting as we go along. So,
Thank you, Mike.
Yes, the issue of sidewalks getting plowed, particularly the town sidewalks and snow removal in the downtown area. Myself, Mr. Kerrigan, and Michael, and the Director of Public Works will be getting together on Monday to begin discussions and planning around those events, that
Thank you.
process.
Anyone else? Okay, next item is administrative business, late night closings. What's the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chair, I move that we approve late night closings for Saturdays in the month of November 2019 as requested.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? There being none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, unanimous. Old and new business, VFW Post 523 Buddy Poppies. We received a letter from the VFW requesting permission to conduct their annual fundraising drive at the intersection of High Street and Church Street on Saturday, November 9th, between the hours of 9 a.m. and 2 p.m. to solicit donations for the Veterans Relief Fund that assists veterans. What's the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chair, I move that we approve the request for permission from VFW Post 523 to conduct their annual Buddy Poppy Drive at the intersection of Hyde and Church Streets on Saturday, November 9th, 2019, between the hours of 9 AM and 2 PM.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any, moved and seconded, any discussion? There being none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, unanimous. Crystal Club Charity 5K Fun Run. Ms. Barbara Ranieri is requesting approval to conduct the 5th Annual Crystal Freeze 5K Walk Run in Clinton to raise funds for the Crystal Club Charity. What's the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chair, just as a note, it didn't seem to have in the message a date, but the last couple of years, it's been like the first week of January. I think it was January 5th last year.
Yeah, I've got it
So
here.
I assume it would be that same, probably Saturday of that week, probably. So.
Yeah, it's my understanding it's the 7th,
7th?
December 7th.
December 7th. Okay. What's the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion that we approve the request of Crystal Club Charity for a 5K fun run on December 7th. Pending approval of the police chief for the road closures, et cetera, et cetera.
Is there, moved and seconded, any discussion?
Should we amend the motion to say if the date isn't actually December 7th, if it's a different date?
I don't know that we actually have to formalize it in the motion. We're good. What's the pleasure of the board?
Well, we already did.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. LED street light dimming proposal. Mike, would you want to take this one?
Sure, Mr. Chair, just to, I kind of left on the table just a little bit of a graph that shows the savings that would result in some dimming schedule. The current streetlights are going to be, they're set right now to operate from dusk till dawn, so they'll automatically come on and off during those time periods, and they will change during the season. So we do have controllers on there, so they will be adjusted to the seasonal time frames of dusk and dawn. But there are additional rebates from both National Grid and from the state grant that we're getting for this project if we do a dimming schedule as well. So the recommendation from our consultant from Tanco Lighting is to try a 70% dimming. So if we make that commitment to the state, we will get additional funding back to pay for the town's cost of this project. So a little bit as it talks here from MAPC, they're the ones that's administering the state grant. It indicates that at 70% brightness, that the human eye would not detect any major change in the 70%. It said that, even as an example, it says an actual light output at 50%, we would perceive it as 70% of original brightness. So I think if we go from full to 70, I think it would be a negligible change. If it went down to 50, I think you would see that that reduction, you probably would be able to notice a bit, but I don't believe there's going to be a major change in 70%. So in talking with our controller company, SimCon Lighting, who are doing the controllers, and we have a software where we can go in, it tells us when the lights are out, we can adjust the light, one light here and there, adjust the whole system. It's been pretty good technology that allows us better maintenance and control over the product. That they felt that most communities doing is 70%, and they've been very happy with that, and that the hours can all be adjusted to whatever the board feels. Whether it's, they suggested maybe midnight to 4 a.m. if there was concerned about that sunrise time frame around 5 or 6 a.m. If they still wanted some bright lighting, so it could go back up then at that time, or 1 to 5 if that period, they would go back up at 5 o'clock. But I think if we do a 4-hour, 70%, we would save 21% on our billing, so we'd get a billing savings forever, but then also we would get, like I said, we would get the rebate as well too. So just wanted to see if it's something the board wanted to at least try, and that all the experts have been telling us that probably to the naked eye, it would probably be a negligible change during those periods when would be the least amount of people would be out and about around town.
What's the pleasure of the board?
Well, I think we should try it, and I think we should try it. Well, I mean, I think the advantage of doing it from 12 to 4 is there are some people who get up early to run. You know, I don't think there's many people running at 1 o'clock in the morning,
Right.
but there are people running at 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning. And as I mentioned to the board once before, my daughter once mentioned to me that the people many of the people don't appreciate some of the things we have in Clinton. And she mentioned that if you wanted to get up and run at 5 o'clock in the morning, you could, because there's streetlights and you can be seen. So, I mean, I think we should try it.
Is that a motion?
I'll make a motion that we try out the 70%, which would be dimming it by 30%, so that it'd be at 70% of full capacity.
Right.
So we'd be dimming it by 30% between the hours of midnight and 4. I'm looking at you because
Get up that early. Are we, is there a problem on the other end with last call for establishments downtown? And what time? I don't stay out that late either, so.
must be around 1.
Yeah, on the weekends, it's 1.
So we need
for
we need 4
Friday,
hours then.
Friday nights, and then Saturday, the board generally grants an extension, so it's usually Friday and Saturday, so the rest of the week would be midnight. So it would be Friday and Saturday would be 1 AM, so.
We'll try midnight to 4. That's okay.
Yeah, try midnight to 4, and if there's problems, we'll identify them.
Yeah, right, I think if we just commit to the number of hours for the savings, I think that's the bigger factor. And we can always, we have control over the software to do the time frame. So as long as it's a 4-hour block, and I suppose we could even get creative and do 2 hours here and 2 hours there, but I think it's, as long as we're doing a 4-hour dimming, that's where we'll get the savings.
I'll second that motion.
Is there any discussion?
Yeah, I just have a question. Who actually controls the dimming? Like the DPW or the?
The project is just finishing the punch list, so we haven't done that yet.
Okay,
The company is setting up the standard protocol of the full lighting for the dusk to dawn. Myself and the DPW superintendent did go through a walkthrough on how to operate the software. We would have access to go through that.
okay,
So right now it would be either myself or the DPW superintendent. There had been some discussion that maybe in the future, it may be something facilities might undertake.
yeah,
But I think in this first year, we
Yeah.
wanted to make sure that the operations were tight and focus on the day-to-day operations before we started adding a lot more projects and responsibility on their plate.
right.
But that might be something down the road that the facilities department could take over.
All right, yeah, I'm just curious, is it gonna, like, a laptop at the DPW office will control it? Do they have?
Yeah,
the-
it's an internet-based system, so
Okay,
anywhere. So
anywhere.
anywhere you have internet access and
Okay.
passwords, you can get in. The software is housed at the lighting control company at Simcon. So
Okay.
it's their proprietary software.
Gotcha.
So we have 2 gateway boxes.
Yeah.
So that it's done wirelessly. So the controllers on the streetlights will speak to those boxes. That box will then send the signal to the software at Simcon, and then we can log in and view the operation of the lights through that software. So anyone can do it from anywhere. It's just, once they're set up, you're probably just going in to check to see if there's outages.
Yeah,
So in terms of moving lights on and off, it would probably be very rare that once they're set, we would change lights. The biggest value of that is that right now, we have to wait for people to call us when there's a light out, or,
Right.
one of the town officials driving around town and noticing it. Where this here, it will tell us. So
Okay.
once we log in, once a day or once a week, it'll check and give us a list of repairs that we would need to check on. And with these lights being brand new, we hope that the first year, that's not gonna happen either.
okay,
We are dealing with right now with a couple of the defect ones that we're finding out right now, so the vendor is currently coming back to make those correct, so that once we take ownership, they're all gonna be working as they should. So hopefully within the first year, we're not gonna have any service calls, knock on wood. We won't have any programming issues. So it should be kind of a light lift for the first year or two. And then beyond that, we can decide at that point whether another department will take it over at that point.
Okay, and these are for lights that have yet to be installed yet, or are these for the newer lights that have been installed recently, or?
Yet they're all the ones that are installed right now. So
Okay.
all the new, the Cobra Head streetlights, the
Okay.
ones with the arms out
Okay.
there,
Okay.
those have all been replaced with LED lights. We have some that the power wasn't reading power. There's some that are, you'll see some day burners. If you'll see during the day, there's some lights that are on.
Mhm.
The controllers need to be adjusted or changed out. So they're
Okay.
working on those right now.
Okay,
It does not deal with the downtown lighting because that's all owned by National Grid. These are only the lights the town of Clinton owns.
okay,
And most of those are going to be replaced through the downtown improvement project. So
okay,
one thing that we would like to, I mentioned it to DPW and to economic development, that as we go forward and we do projects where we're replacing lighting, like through decorative lighting, that those spec of those lights include the controller that would be compatible with SimCon lighting, that would then speak to, it can talk to our software, so that those lights can also become part of the system. So they're mapped on a town map, so we know where they are. They'll tell us whether they're working or not working, and that it'll cover every light that we own, so that we don't have to say, well, we have the Cobra Heads are good, but then we have to drive down High Street every day to make sure those lights are on. It'll tell us itself, so we're gonna try to we're getting the Walnut Street lights, the lights on that system, and the High Street lights, with next year's project as well, too.
okay.
Anyone else? Questions or discussion? There being none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous.
Thank you.
Green Communities Fuel Efficient Vehicle Policy. Mike?
Mr. Chair, again, this is, I know we've talked about the last couple of meetings, this is one of the requirements that the board would need to adopt for the Green Communities designation. As I mentioned at the last meeting, that deadline got pushed out till November 22nd, so certainly there will be another meeting before that timeframe, that if the board has read the policy and they're comfortable with it, certainly you can adopt it, and we'll put that as part of the package. But if you are wanted to also wait until a full presentation at the next meeting, we could do that as well too. But this is just one of the requirements to make the designation for the green communities.
What's the pleasure of the board? Do we want to wait for a presentation at our next meeting, or move forward tonight? Is anyone inclined to move forward tonight?
Well,
I wouldn't mind.
I've
but-
just read it, it's not very, it just says that we would be committed to buying fuel-efficient vehicles.
Right.
So I don't know what a full presentation would entail other than that.
No, I think it was gonna be the full presentation on the whole green communities package that
Oh.
we're sending in,
Oh.
not just this here. It would be,
Oh.
this would be part of that package, but just the whole green communities application that we'll be submitting, so. But this policy is not overly burdensome, you're right. They are trying to encourage communities to go to that. There are a lot of communities like public safety vehicles and buses and DPW trucks that are exempt.
Yeah.
And beyond that, we don't have a lot of town vehicles. We're not in the habit of buying a lot of vehicles beyond those heavy-duty ones that we need. And like Mr. Jakonski indicated, it would say that we're committed to pursuing that and exploring that ability to purchase those if it works for the town. So it's just a policy that would kind of encourage departments to look at this technology. But I think for us, the impact again would be very slight because we don't, I don't think we currently have a lot of vehicles in that fleet that would fall under this policy right now.
Mr. Chair, I move that the board adopt a fuel-efficient vehicle policy for town departments as presented.
Is there a second? Any discussion?
Yes, would this policy only pertain to new purchases, right? Like,
Right.
anything we have now would be grandfathered?
Right,
Okay.
absolutely. Yep.
That's all.
absolutely.
And it's not a mandate either.
Okay.
We consider it
Forcing to buy
in
the new
the purchasing process.
electric cars.
Any other discussion? Being none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Unanimous.
Thank you.
Boards and commissions appointment process, the Government Affairs Committee has recommended to the that the Board of Selectmen take over the responsibility for appointing memberships of policy-making boards and commissions. This is a recommendation from the Government Affairs Committee to the full board. We did discuss it previously. The genesis of this is that all appointments were the domain of the Board of Selectmen, and we transferred that total authority to the town administrator. We've discussed differences of opinions and differences of policymaking, and feel that it's appropriate that the Board of Selectmen make the direct appointments to these boards and commissions. That's the recommendation of the Government Affairs Committee. If it's approved at our next meeting or a subsequent meeting, we will be identifying as best we can the appointments that are in place and the terms that are associated with those appointments. But at some point, we have to make sure that, over the years, people have been appointed to fill unexpired terms of people. So we could have, the appointment should be for 3 years for most of these positions, except for a couple that are 5 years. So we need to identify those as best we can, and we'll present those recommendations to the board at another meeting. Did I cover that?
Yeah, I think so,
adequately?
yeah. Basically, these are policy-making boards, and our feeling is that policy is more the realm of the Board of Selectmen than Michael, where Michael's main concern is one of operation and management. So that's sort of the reason we thought we might separate the two.
And
Are we looking for a motion?
We're looking for a motion to adopt the list that was presented. These would be the boards that the Board of Selectmen would now start making the appointments for directors.
Mr. Chair, I move that the board adopt the recommendation of the Government Affairs Committee to take over responsibility for appointing memberships of policy-making boards and commissions.
Second.
Is there any discussion? There being none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. Subcommittee reports.
Okay, before we finish old new business, Mr. Chair, were we gonna get an update on the fire department negotiations, or could we?
Oh, that was taken care of.
Yeah,
That was
sure,
the-
yeah, what I, could do, this morning, there was a draft of the fire integration contract that was submitted to the union.
Great.
The union said they will take that in review and get back to us with any comments or questions that they might have on that document, and then hopefully everything will be worked out for the board to sign at the next meeting.
Thank you.
Anyone else under old and new business? Committee reports?
Mr. Chair, the Cable Committee met this evening before our meeting. We approved a purchase of some new equipment for the schools and continued negotiations with our 10-year Comcast contract. We hope to receive final terms to review in the next 2 or 3 weeks. I think we're pretty close. As far as marketing communication, we had our semi-annual cleanup day on October 5th. We had some challenges with volunteers. It was SAT day, and it's a busy fall day, as many of us know. But we teamed up with the neighborhood group in around South Meadow, and together, working in downtown and down there, I think we pulled together maybe 15 or 20 bags. So for a smaller group than in the spring, I think we did at least we did some good work. We're looking forward to doing this more regularly. I think spring and fall is going to work, and to getting word out to make it more of a thing that people look forward to. So more to come on that. That's all.
Thank you, Sean. Anyone else?
Well, just because I find it interesting, I think perhaps you might also. In addition to the really very substantive and the things that Phil talked about in terms of the downtown improvement, we've more or less decided, although I don't think we formally decided, but it seems like we're going to go ahead with having a self-watering thing for planters on the light poles. Because they wanted to put planters on the light poles, and I said, they'll be dead.
Mhm.
If it don't rain, they're
You're
gonna be
always
dead.
an optimist.
Huh? You know?
Eternal.
Well, I mean, drive through some of these towns, you see
with
these
you.
dead plants. You know? And the thought of somebody going around every single day over, 70 light poles and spraying. So, but there is an option to run a little pipe, and it can be timed, and so I'm just sort of thrilled with that, because I do like flowers, contrary to many people
You just
believe.
don't like trees.
I just don't like trees. I don't like them in the downtown, but that's over and done with.
Will we still have trees?
Yes,
yes, we will.
I lost that battle, one of the many battles I have lost.
But you won the flowers.
Well, I was happy that we're gonna have a method for watering the flowers. I wasn't
gonna-
against the flowers.
Are we gonna water the trees?
Well, interestingly enough, I mean, if you want to hear, the engineer said, well, if you're going to water the plants, you could have a system to automatically water. So as the water pipe goes by, it can water the tree too. So that's under more discussion, because the tree only really needs to be watered when it's first put in. And it might be more trouble than it's worth.
Okay.
We considered fake plants
Fake
that wouldn't
plants?
require water?
No. I never,
That's because I
this
used
is
to
a
work at
very
Micro.
green
Look at
group
the
that I'm
plastic
working with
angles.
here, you know?
Okay. All right. Any other subcommittee business? There being none, our next meeting is scheduled for November 6th at 7 PM. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded, all those in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. We're out of here.
You want you to start it on time, we to get out of here.
A minute early.
No, he said he was gonna start with us.
But Ed was talking a lot.
I was actually gonna, I was gonna see if you guys are gonna be around Friday.
Oh, right.
Oh, that way.
Stop on Friday, two things are.
Sure.
Oh, that's who it is.
Property is down Mr. Kimmons today, okay, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna get an updated one of the property, it's almost in child block, okay, right?
Okay.
It'll be an updated one, right? Some of the people, they heard about aggressively going after it.
Yeah.
Actually down paid.